Hello friends. I have put off doing my review of the Index on purpose. I know a lot of you have been chomping at the bit for it. You want to hear my thoughts, which is really flattering. But I wanted to make sure the points didn't drop at the same time. So before I assessed anything in the Index, I wanted to make sure the points were out. I also wanted to actually take time to go through everything and really understand it. And primarily, I wanted to make sure that I got some games in before I passed judgment on it. At this point, I have played 6 games of 10th edition. You guys have seen 3 of them. And here are my thoughts. I really like how Grey Knights play in 10th edition. I like the Index. I think there's a lot of fun in here. I think there's a lot of cool stuff. There's a lot of problems, but overall, I think that genuinely it's really fun. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that we can do. I've always been a really big fan of the teleporting aspects of our army. The idea of this strike force that can kind of show up anywhere at any time. If you've ever read The Emperor's Gift, it begins with a really cool scene with a bunch of squad of Terminators sort of aiming at a spot in the center of them, an empty spot, and they are summoned by an Inquisitor on the planet below, and they all teleport out of the ship where they're all sort of aiming into the center, and they teleport down to the planet surrounding this heretic governor, and they all fire their triggers in mid teleportation so that as soon as they appear, they just blast him. It's a really cool idea, and there's a lot of fun stuff in here that works this way. And overall, I'm really happy with it. I think I'm just gonna go through it, tell you what I think of each piece of it. The teleport assault rule, that's the first part. Also, these are great. I'm a big fan of these. I know all the rules are free online, so I'm never gonna recommend that anybody buys any of these, but I've been enjoying them, especially as flashcards for learning the game. But the army rule, teleport assault, is sick. I really like it. I remember when this first previewed, and people in the club, Ed, if you're watching this, told me that it was the single best rule in the game, and Grey Knights are going to be broken, and they're going to be just incredible right out of the gate. And the Tacoma Open is this weekend. It's probably happening right now if you're watching this video, because it's coming out on Saturday. I remember people telling me, oh, Stefan, you're going to win the entire Tacoma Open because you're going to have the most broken faction in the game. And I looked at this rule. I looked at it again and again, and I was like, slow down, guys. We're still bound by deep strike parameters, so, 9 inches away. We can't teleport out of engagement range, which is a big change from the last few editions where you can Gate of Infinity just straight out of engagement range. And also, you can't score primaries. You can't land on objectives. Because you don't exist in the command phase when you're doing this. So it's really, really good, but I think there's some limitations to it that, in my opinion, are really good. Just from a balanced perspective and a fun gameplay perspective, it doesn't mean you can just zip away from everything without consequence. If an enemy unit tags you, you can't zip away, and also there is consequence. You can't score points with that unit on the next turn. So I'm a big fan of that. I think it's great. I think it's super flavorful, and as the core rule for Grey Knights, this is the thing to think about. Regardless of points, regardless of weapons, data sheets, all that shit, as the core rule for Grey Knights, this is good. This is a thing that, again, the army rules are probably the most immutable things, the things that just will not change. Data sheets they can update, but the army rules are the identity of the army, and this is a great identity. I love it. The detachment rule, it's fun. I don't really use it a whole lot. It's fine. Again, another one that people were like, oh shit, 6-inch advanced fly with everything is gonna be broken. But no, and again, I was like, guys, we don't know any of the context around this. We don't know what it's gonna be like, but everybody was telling me it's really, really good. And turns out fly is not what it used to be. It does not mean move through all terrain regardless of how you feel. It just means you kind of Pythagorean draw up the side, the fucking hypotenuse up to the building as opposed to crawling up it, which is still really good. But honestly, I'm not a big fan of it. It's good for getting some early movement speed, but because of the army rule, our positioning isn't a thing we need a lot of help with. And honestly, we don't have any assault weapons in the army, and the only unit of ours that can advance and charge is a Dread Knight, which I'll get into later. And so if you're advancing 6 inches, you're not doing anything else. You're just moving your really expensive units somewhere. And that's what you're doing for one of the 5 turns in the game. So it's okay. I'm excited to see what other detachments we get, though, whenever eventually our codex drops, which again is why the core army rule being good is important. If this is our core army rule, that'd be lame. Stratagems. I think overall our stratagems are really cool. The big ones that people have been talking about are Miss Demos, the one where when something moves within 9 inches of you, you pay a command point and you either move 6 inches or you return to deep strike. Very cool. It's a lot of really tactical play around it, and same with Prognosticated Arrival, which is, if you remember 8th edition, it is Dynamic Insertion, which they probably changed because it sounded way too sexual being called Dynamic Insertion. But Prognosticated Arrival allows you to arrive 3 inches away as opposed to 9 away. You can't charge afterwards. Those two things, just as like a tactical move combined with Rapid Ingress, are really interesting. It means there's a lot of moving pieces in the Grey Knights army, and this is what I found with every game I've played so far. Unlike Custodes or Knights, no offense to those armies, but or Space Marines even with Oath of Moment, which is sort of just like point at something, obliterate it, move to next thing, point, obliterate. Grey Knights are very, very, very tactical. I can feel every time I'm playing a game that there is a high skill ceiling, and I'm just down here right now because I've only had these rules for a couple of weeks. And so I see I don't look at my army and think, this is bad, or this is broken good. I look at my army and I think, okay, I can see that there are a lot of things I can do that I haven't learned yet. So what this means is over the next 3 years or so, as this edition folds out, I'm gonna get better and better, and I'm gonna keep playing, and I'm going to understand these moving pieces a lot better. In the same way that in like 8th edition, if anybody remembers, like my old blog from way back then when I used to post 8th edition battle reports, eventually because Grey Knights were fucking garbage back in 8th edition, but I knew all of our strengths, I leaned into them hard, and I avoided all of our weaknesses, and I could like eyeball a 9-inch deep strike everywhere on the board, and I sort of saw that in my mind's eye whenever I'd get down to playing a competitive game. And that was an awesome place to be in, just knowing that I had a really terrible codex and my army sucked, but there were some really strong pieces that I could utilize really well. And I think that's what I see here, is there's some pieces, whereas a lot of you, because I asked, a lot of you have been saying, how do you deal with vehicles? What do we do for heavy weapons? And here's my answer, we don't. Grey Knights don't have a way of cracking knights. We just don't. Our Terminators with lethal hits on the charge is the best option we got. And that sucks. It's just not good. So we don't. And I can think of a dozen ways to try to like cover that, souping in other like allies, or even leaning into the Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight, which is 245 points. It's like 100 points shy of a knight. Like leaning into that, maybe filling some las cannons, maybe doing some combos with teleportation and purgation squads. But honestly, at the end of the day, when we do all that kind of stuff, and you guys have suggested some really cool stuff, like in comments on my videos, some really cool combos. But at the end of the day, all those combos are trying to fill a gap that we have and not leaning into our strength, which is mobility, which is unpredictability, and which is like tactical movement. In my opinion, this index is best served by leaning into the things that we're good at, which again is positioning, and leaning away from stuff that we can't do, which is unfortunately killing. We can clear infantry and chaff like no one's business, which is awesome, because if some guys use Stormbolters and melee to like wipe out Zangers or Cultists or Guardsmen or something, and that opens up a spot for us to deep strike another unit in. But we're just gonna waste our time trying to do things that we aren't designed to do, which is killing tough targets. Which lore-wise is a shame, because we should be able to kill whatever we touch with fucking Grey Knights, but that's okay. And so I think honestly that's how people need to envision this, is leaning into our strengths. I've said that a lot now. I'm gonna go back into this. Our stratagems are really cool. Haloed and Soulfire. I really liked this stratagem looking at it. The 2 CP, the Grey Knight's unit that deep striked, essentially gets lone operative. It can't be shot outside of 12 inches. I really like that looking at it initially, but Genius of their Cults have that same stratagem, except it's reactive. You can do it when somebody targets you, and it's 1 CP. And CP is really valuable these days. True Silver Armor is awesome. It's just Armor of Contempt. Notably, and a couple of you pointed this out in one of my last videos, and this is a good thing for people to know, you cannot use True Silver Armor when your opponent overwatches, because it specifically says it happens in their shooting phase. The last one, Radiant Strike. I have yet to use Radiant Strike in a way that felt good. I think I did it once with Samandus because he was about to die, and I was like, fuck it, I want to like use his free stratagem. But Radiant Strike is 2 CP to give a single unit devastating wounds, which is a lot, especially considering Terminators. They do lethal hits, which auto wounds, which means they don't roll for wounds, which means they can't proc devastating wounds. So I'm all about Terminators, which means Radiant Strike will rarely ever get used because I don't want to auto wound and not get to roll for the thing I'm spending 2 CP on. So I think honestly that might be our weakest stratagem. The enhancements. I'm gonna go through these just quick. The enhancements were a little disappointing. They're fine. Sigil of Exorcisms returned exactly as it was before. Inescapable Wrath is just a bonus to charge rolls. It's good. It's 15 points. The one that has been really catching my eye lately is First to the Fray. Right out of the gate, I saw that it was 35 points. For those unaware, First to the Fray is an enhancement that allows the leader and the unit it's attached to deep strike turn 1. Right out of the gate, I saw 35 points. Holy shit, that's a lot. And it just seems, and I was like, well, we're going to be, if my opponent goes first, I get to pick up guys and teleport them on my turn anyway. So First to the Fray felt useless. However, in the 6 games I've played, I have noticed that when I go first, I am disappointed because I wanted my opponent to go first so that I could teleport before my first turn begins. First to the Fray allows me to be proactive about that as opposed to just reactive. So if I go first turn and I have somebody in deep strike with First to the Fray, I can still shunt them wherever I want turn 1, which people don't expect. And I could also, like I could do a squad of Terminators 3 inches away from somebody on turn 1. They can't charge, but that's something you got to deal with. Which again, mobility and making people like target what you don't want them to target, forcing them to deal with certain things is our strength. So you might be thinking, all right, First to the Fray is good if you use it on, if you happen to go first. Additionally, you can use First to the Fray in Rapid Ingress. So you can come down to your opponent's turn 1 with First to the Fray, which is sick as hell. Essentially, this is 35 points to put Terminators in a drop pod. They come down turn 1, and they don't have to deal with the clunkiness of the actual drop pod. It's a 35-point drop pod on 1 unit is a really good way of looking at it. And I think it's rad as hell. I'm taking that into the Tacoma Open, and I'm going to see if I can do something with it. It might be interesting. But yeah, then we get into the data sheets, which I hate to say it, but I think the data sheets are where we're the weakest. It's been said everywhere all over the internet, the Grey Knights are far too expensive. I don't know what happened this last weekend, some tournament scene or something, but I got so many messages on Instagram and Discord from people who were just really sad about Grey Knights, and they were telling me that Grey Knights are the worst and we're at the bottom of the fucking, like, leaderboards of all the armies. Which on the one hand I say, pathetic. Just keep going, just keep trucking. You don't know the dark days of 8th edition when we couldn't do anything and you had to claw for every single victory. On the other hand, I say, I totally understand that it sucks when the guys you like are at the bottom, but don't give up. That just means you got an uphill battle and you can try a lot harder. That sounded wrong. Not you can try a lot harder. You get to try and learn more. When you are at the very bottom of the barrel, there is nowhere to go but up. And this is very important. Every single victory you have will be yours. Not because you're Space Marines in the winter of 2020, or Leagues of Votann on release, or Crusher Stampede with Tyranids. You're not just like, this is broken shit and I get to win now. When your army is at the bottom of the barrel, every single victory you have is because of you, because you did the right thing. So keep practicing and you will get there. And once I actually have like a lot more games under my belt and a couple tournaments, I'm planning on doing like a tactical sort of breakdown for how I'm playing Grey Knights. I know a lot of you right now are thinking, but Stefan, you never win on your channel. I win a lot more games that I don't film because the filming aspect of it, I'm very focused on like sort of making the game like entertaining and filming what's happening, and my mind isn't fully focused on the game. But when I actually am actually in the game, or like at a tournament, or like trying against like Dustin or somebody, I'm a lot better. Trust me, this is not me just making it up. Anyway, I'm not gonna go through every data sheet because there's a lot. A couple of things, broad things. I disappointed about changes to psychic abilities, and I know everybody is. It's not the end of the world. I miss the customization of giving people certain powers, and psychic is not good in 10th edition. It is a debuff that our entire army has because there's a lot of anti-psyker things. The other day I read that certain corn demons have a 3-up feel no pain against psychic attacks, which you'll notice is all of our melee weapons. So Grey Knights technically are actually worse at hunting demons than regular Space Marines because there's certain flavors of demons that are just almost immune to our weapons. It makes me think that there was at some point in like the design stage of 10th edition, psychic had like a bonus to it. They dialed back a lot because there's a lot of stuff that has specific defenses against psychic powers. I'm wondering if like maybe psychic damage, maybe psychic attacks like ignored invulns or something early on, or if it was always devastating wounds for psychic powers. But who knows? In any case, long story short, I do wish we had more psychic powers. It's disappointing. The consolidation, the simplification of it is, a little disappointing because a lot of stuff doesn't need to be psychic. That is psychic. It's just given the psychic keyword for no reason. For example, the chaplain. Words of power. While this model's leading a unit, each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack, add 1 to the wound roll. It is identical to the Space Marine chaplain ability, but ours has the psychic tag for some reason. It doesn't mean anything. Or our fucking said dreadnoughts. They have the psyker keyword, so things that are anti-psyker ruin them. We don't have the dreadnought doesn't have a single psychic weapon. He doesn't have a single psychic power. And he doesn't have deep strike, so he can't benefit from our army ability. He just has the psyker keyword for no real reason. On the topic of consolidation, Nemesis weapons. I was very disappointed to see that all the Nemesis weapons got rolled into one. I kind of knew that was coming because of some stuff that happened in 9th edition with like Chaos Space Marines weapons and stuff becoming accursed weapons. I could feel it like in my bones going to happen, but it was still disappointing to see. Because of how few units we have, that was how I distinguished my units, and like I had my halberd squad that was higher strength but lower AP for tackling bigger targets. I had my swords, which are just sort of all-arounders. I had my falchions, which had more attacks, and so they were my horde clearers. Admittedly, I never like actually got them into the positions I wanted, but it was sad to see all of our Nemesis weapons consolidated because now they're all just the same strength 6, AP 2, 2 damage, which isn't a bad profile, but it feels very bland. To that end, that is what I thought when I read it, and I still think that to a degree, but in actual practice, it has been very freeing not having to worry about this unit has these weapons, this unit has these weapons, who's there, blur, 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 and trying to like figure out where all these go. It has been kind of like nice being able to just show up for a game, scoop up 5 Terminators, regardless of what weapons they have, throw them on the board and be like, look at this cool, flavorful, disparate squad. It's neat seeing everybody with different weapons moving around. I don't have to think about it as much, and so I'm finding I can focus more on the actual like capabilities and tactics of it as opposed to like the tactics being in the list building stage, if that makes sense. I do miss the minutia simply because it was one of the few customization things we have. What I do think is unforgivable is the lack of hammers. Hammers should not have been rolled into the other Nemesis weapons. That was very disappointing, and normal Space Marines don't have to follow those restrictions. They get Thunder Hammers. And if you look at Inquisitor Kotias's data sheet, he has a Nemesis Demon Hammer. Why don't we? Anyway, super lame, but that is a side effect of the game becoming overall more simplified, and it's something that they have freedom to expand on in the future. So I'm okay with that cost. Other things that people want me to talk about. A lot of people wanted me to talk about best and worst units. I don't really know how to comment on that, simply because I don't know if I have the best lens for that right now. I'm just one person. I'm with my own experiences, my own play style, my own approach, and what's best for me isn't necessarily going to be best for somebody else. I also, if you've followed my channel for a while, you know I'm going to run a ton of Terminators regardless, whether it's like late 8th edition and they suck eggs and everybody's bringing Strike Marines, or right now when they're really tough but incredibly overcosted. So I don't know if I can really speak to that one. I am not the arbiter of all things Grey Knights, because I am just a guy who likes Grey Knights. But Terminators feel really chunky, really cool, and really powerful right now, and that feels awesome. And I love them being strong and survivable, having T5 and a 4-up invuln save. It feels excellent. There are still certain things that, like, if a Redemptor Dreadnought just points at a squad of Terminators, they're gone, or Genestealer Cult's Aberrants just obliterate them, and that doesn't feel great. But for the most part, they are a lot chunkier now. To that end, I really, really like that the Apothecaries and the Ancients are built into the Terminator squads. It was a weird choice when I saw it initially. And again, this is one of those things that, like, on paper really bothered me. I was like, oh shit, they took away 2 of my characters. My Apothecary and my Ancient are gone. But instead what it did was, especially because that shit's free, there's no, like, you don't have to pay for a Narthesium upgrade or anything. My brain went, well shit, I'm gonna run an Apothecary in every single squad. Oh, I get to model up an Apothecary for every single squad. And I immediately went and modeled up Apothecaries with all those extra Narthesiums I've had from my dozens of Terminator kits, painted some white helmets, and now I have an Apothecary in every squad, and that feels really cool. So a lot of these sheets gave me modeling opportunities, which, as a ardent fan of Grey Knights, I was really into that. I've got 3 banners spread across 3 squads now. That just feels really cool. And I'm noticing that from a modeling opportunity, the lack of points minutia, oh, I don't want to model up a Psy Cannon because it costs 5 points and I can't afford that in my list. I'm just like, yeah, today I'll put a Psy Cannon on this Strike Marine. That sounds fun. And then it's a different thing you get to paint up. The leaner list design of 10th edition is really favorable to modeling, because I kind of get to just do whatever I want. I don't have to worry if it balances out points-wise, because it's the same points regardless. So I'm just going to say I thought Terminators are the best unit in here. The worst? Dread Knights. Dread Knights are way too expensive and don't have the damage output that they should. And they just die. But I am bringing my Tacoma list, and I'll tell you why in a couple of days when I do a video on that. But yeah, it's, I don't know, Dread Knights, if you look at the weapon profiles, they just gutted them. Dread Fists are strength 6, AP 1, 1 damage. Dread Fists are less powerful than a guy on the ground with a short sword. How does that make sense? The sweeping of the big sword is also strength 5, AP 1, 1 damage. It's also weaker than a guy just sweeping a sword on the ground. It really feels like they scaled them back too much. I know that everything's less lethal in this edition, so I get it, but points-wise, they should have been less expensive, if that's the case. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't really want to speak to best and worst, because that doesn't feel like my place to do. But outside, a couple people asked about Paladins, so I want to give my thoughts on Paladins real quick. Paladins, I don't see any reason to take them. They are pricier than Terminators. They don't have lethal hits, and that's about it. They're, I guess, a little tougher, but our Terminators are really, really pricey. Too much, so yeah, I don't I don't really see a point of bringing paladins. They hit a little better. They can take more special weapons. I think they can take, what, 2 per 5? Yeah, they can take 2 per 5. But, like, our special weapons suck ass, so you don't want to bring them anyway. They're not worth it, in my opinion. They might be cool, but they're just not worth it. Our generic characters are cool, our brother captains and our grandmasters. I do wish we had more customization for them. Weapon options and psychic powers, but I think that's the same across every army. Although a lot of other people can choose war gear. We couldn't really for them. Anyway, I love that Land Raiders are really good. I think that's so cool. I painted up a new Storm Raven because maybe that'll be good. It has a bunch of guns, which we lack, and it also has cool armored resilience, so -1 damage when hitting it. There's just some... That's the primary takeaway from these data sheets for me, is there's a lot of cool, interesting things that make me want to model up and play with a bunch of new stuff. It's given a lot of stuff a new lease on life. Maybe not good, but a new lease on life. Before closing this down, I do want to real quickly talk about my impressions of 10th in general. I've played half a dozen games, and I've seen probably 50, because in the store, like, people play all the time here. And I really like it. I think its bones are really, really good. I think it's, in a way that I can't properly articulate, just genuinely fun. A lot of the stuff I read before 10th edition was released made me really nervous and made me be like, oh, this seems like a bad rule, but in practice, it all works really well. And again, I can't really articulate why, but it all just meshes together really well, and it's really fun to play. And I'm really looking forward to playing like 7 games at the Tacoma Open this weekend. By the way, I keep referencing that. There's a huge GT, the first in GW's like American GT series happening this weekend, just south of us in Tacoma. And me and a bunch of friends and a bunch of people from the club are going, and I'm gonna film. It's gonna be really fun. Yeah, I'm excited to play a lot more, which is something I couldn't say during the latter half of 9th edition. Everything got exceptionally killy and very powerful, and it kind of the edition was kind of figured out, and I didn't have much fun with it, which you probably noticed from my lack of battle reports in the last like year. But I'm genuinely having a lot of fun with 10th edition. Once the points change and a few codices come out, it's going to be really cool. I'm really stoked about it. I'm excited to share more of it with you, not just games, but like hobbying aspects as well, because I'm really excited. Hopefully I've been showing images of the stuff I've been working on in this video, so we'll see. But yeah, last thing I want to say is there's a lot of salt going around online about Grey Knights right now, about 10th edition in general, but especially around Grey Knights. I think there's like 10 Grey Knights players at the US Open this weekend. Remember that rules change and editions come and go, but the little toys you paint are yours forever. You made them, you painted them, and they're very cool. It is so much more rewarding to stick with a faction and enjoy painting them, and enjoy how they're uniquely yours, and then struggling to get better with them and losing all the time, but struggling and finding your niche and moving up in the ranks and like learning as like you're at the bottom of the barrel, like learning as you're getting crushed down, but sticking with your guys because you love them. Like that feels so much better than switching to a new faction because they're good right now. At the end of the day, I don't give a fuck about winning Warhammer. I'm gonna try my best. I'm gonna do my best to win every game that I'm in. But that's like tertiary for why I'm there. A, I'm there because I want to spend time with people, and it's really fun, and it's cool, like interacting and telling a story with this other person. B, I'm there to show off all of my pretty little models that I spend so much time with. And then third, I'm there because I want to win the game. Maybe even like fourth. Third might be because I want an afternoon where I can just hang out and drink beer. But yeah. Win rates don't matter. The competitive scene ultimately doesn't matter. What matters is the games you're playing and if you're enjoying them. And you can. By just doing. Yeah. Well, that went in a weird direction. Peace out. See you guys next week.